Hi, guys. Welcome to the Move Forward podcast with Matt Campisi. I'm your host, Matt Campisi. And on today's podcast, I'm going to be talking about size and how size can matter. I'm going to be talking about size pertaining to height and weight. Height and weight. These are things that seem trivial, right? They seem like these are just descriptive factors of a person. Somebody's height, somebody's weight is just a way to describe a person. It seems all so trivial. But is it? Is it so trivial? A person's height, a person's weight. I'm going to be talking about size on today's podcast and how a person's size can matter, how it can affect their life. So I'm going to talk about height. What do you think it's like being a male in the United States of America? Because we're talking about the United States. Cultures tend to be different in other countries. So let's just focus on the United States of America. So what is it like to be a male? Doesn't matter what race you are. Doesn't matter what ethnicity you are. Let's just go with being a male in the United States of America and being short-statured. Well, what's short-statured, you might ask? Well, what's the average? Let's say that, they say the average is somewhere around 5'9". I think it might be 5'8" and something and change somewhere, but let's just round it to 5'9" is about the average height for a male in the United States of America. So short-statured would be, you would obviously think anything below that, right? You're below average. And then obviously the further you are away from that 5'9", the more profound the effect of your height might have. So if you are, let's say, for example, 5'6", which is my height, you would be considered short-statured. You would be considered a short person, right? And of course, it's different for women, right? And like I said earlier, it could be different for other cultures. For example, I know last time I checked the stats, I think Vietnam, the Vietnamese had the much lower average height. So it just depends. So it's all depends on the environment that we're talking about. But in the United States of America, we're going to say short-statured is anything less than 5'9". Typically, if you're 5'8", you're 1 inch below average. The effects are going to be negligible. You may feel them, but they're going to be pretty negligible. And obviously, if you are, let's say, a male who's 5 foot, it's going to be more considerable. So how does short stature impact a person's life? How would it impact our case study, our male in the United States who, let's say, is 5'6"? How could that impact your life? Well, there is something in this world that is called heightism. And I'm sure you've heard all kinds of isms out there, racism, sexism, all kinds of isms. Well, there is such a thing as heightism. There is also such a thing as weightism, where, it is a prejudice, a bias against being short or being fat in the case of weight. So for our hypothetical United States male who is 5'6", that person is likely to experience what is called heightism. And that is, that negativity, negative stereotypes, and negative outlook surrounding the issue of short stature. So what are some stereotypes? Some stereotypes that we typically hear about males in the United States of America who are short-statured. Well, one of, and probably the biggest stereotype, is the Napoleon complex. Have you ever heard of this? The Napoleon complex. That is the short man syndrome. That is where a man who is short-statured has to compensate for his short stature, and they compensate in being typically overly aggressive, compensate like you might see short-statured men driving big old trucks big, big, big. They got to compensate because they're small. They have to compensate by, driving some big monster truck, being overly aggressive, being quick to fight, being into weightlifting where they build their body so they have huge muscles, and they've just got to compensate. Short fuse, quick to fight. That is the typical stereotype. They call it the Napoleon complex. They call it short man syndrome. That is a stereotype, right? It's a stereotype, right? Because is every short-statured male that way? I can tell you I'm not that way. I'm not the first to fight. I don't go out there picking fights with people. I don't have a short fuse. In fact, I have a pretty long fuse. I do not drive a monster truck. And as you can see from looking at me right now on this video, I am not a bodybuilder. So therefore, we can conclude, wait a minute, this doesn't apply to all short-statured men. So this is starting to sound like a stereotype. We're in familiar territory here. This is like starting to sound like a prejudice. This is starting to sound like things that are similar to like when we look down on people who are disabled. This is starting to sound similar to like when we are looking down on people of a different ethnicity, women, other different types of stereotypes and prejudices, right? I mean, we're all smart enough to pick up on that. But when we look at things like height and weight, we seem to just dismiss it so quickly and think it's trivial. That couldn't possibly impact somebody's life, could it? It does. And that's what today's podcast is all about. We're going to talk about how size can impact a person's life. And, I'm a short-statured guy. Like I said, I'm only 5'6". So I don't want to take over this podcast and just have it all about height, because it's also about weight. What do you think it's like, if you are that same male in the United States of America and you're, 350 pounds, or you're 400 pounds, or, you're a big guy. Do you think that there's not stereotypes associated with that, just like there's stereotypes associated with height? What kinds of stereotypes can you think of? Maybe that they're lazy, that all they do is sit on the couch or lay in bed all day, eating Doritos and watching TV and playing games, and that's the reason why they're fat, because they don't exercise. And they've got their own stereotypes too. It kind of sounds like a prejudice here, right? And that's what weightism is all about. So how does that impact a person's life? It obviously can't be all good, right? There's some serious challenges associated with being short and with being fat. The obvious one that I think has been talked about, has received a little bit of attention, and rightfully so, it should, is how it affects your romantic prospects. If you're familiar with, the dating apps and that sort of thing on the internet, you typically see with women, the most important factor, without a shadow of a doubt, is the man's height. They will accept all kinds of perceived flaws, but height is one of those things that they will not tolerate, the vast majority. Now, let's not get into stereotypes here. Maybe there's some, right, that will accept a short-statured male, but there are very, very many women in this world who will reject a man simply because he's short. Some of them say, if you're not in the 6 foot and above, I won't even talk to you. Others, you've got to be 5'9". Anything less than 5'9", you don't stand a chance with that woman. So that's obviously something that detrimentally impacts short-statured men's lives. If they're limited by women who would talk to them and give them a chance because of their height. And it's similar with weight as well. Women will reject men based on their weight. I think it's more profound when it comes to weight on the women's side. I think that fat women, overweight women, have a much harder time in the dating world, similar to short-statured men. So obviously, first thought in your mind is, well, why don't we link up these short men and these fat women, right? And then, problem solved, right? Well, it's much more complicated than that. Fat women reject short men, and short men reject fat women. So this is the problem in society. This is our biases. This is our prejudices about the way that a person looks. That the way that you look, and some people have coined this lookism as the larger aspect. Lookism, it's the way that you look detrimentally impacts your life. And they've done countless studies on this, on, most Fortune 500 CEOs are above average height, and just how the way that you look can impact your life, can affect your romantic prospects in life, your romantic life, your professional life, ascending the corporate ladder, so to speak. The way that you're treated in social situations is obviously affected by the way that you look. It all matters. Folks, the point is, this is not trivial. This is pretty serious if you are a person who is affected by lookism, who is affected by short stature, weight, and other issues that affect the way that you look. So I'm going to be talking with a special guest on today's podcast, and I'm going to be talking about lookism and how lookism has affected this special guest. And the only thing I ask on this podcast is keep an open mind, and I ask that you reflect on this. And if this has affected you, if you have been affected by lookism, I want you to think about it. I want you to reflect on this. And hopefully by society talking about it and accepting it, we can challenge our biases, we can challenge our stereotypes, and we can move forward in creating a better society where the way that we look does not, or has much less of an impact on the way that we are treated in the world. Okay, I'm here with Chad. Chad, how's everything going?
Chadlet Maxxing.
Chadlet Maxxing. I'm a big fan of your TikTok and your YouTube
Thank
page.
you. Not my real name.
Not your real name. Gotcha. So I'm a big fan, man. I'm very impressed with how comfortable you are talking about heightism, and I think you've got some great insights into it. So I had to have a conversation with you, man. I'm very compelled to have a conversation with you because I love what you're putting out there, man.
Thank you.
So you're welcome. You're welcome. So I want to start by saying, what has life been like for you as a short male in the U.S.?
Short. What was the last word?
In this country, what has life been like for you, being a short man?
Okay, well, it didn't really register to me until I was about 16 or 15 years old, because before that I was pretty normal sized, and then I discovered that all the other guys were still growing and the women were still growing too, and I wasn't, and I just really didn't think much of it for freshman year, at least, because I was getting a good amount of attention, from girls. But then, I went to a summer camp and I started seeing some patterns with some of the girls who they would give the most attention to. And it was always the tall guy. And I started hearing them make fun of a shorter guy. And I was like, what the hell? Like, I'm the same height as that guy. And then, I would go to the doctor and she would say, when I was about 15, she'd say, your growth has plateaued. Something must be wrong. And I was like, what? Like something's wrong? And then we tested the growth plates and found that they were fused. And that's when I had a mental breakdown. Totally started banging my head against the wall right in the middle of the doctor's office and trying to self-harm in the car. You said there was no censorship, so I can use that word, right?
Absolutely, yeah. Speak freely.
Yeah. Trying to self-harm in the car. I ended up getting taken to a mental health facility for teens and realized that I can freak out as much as I want and it's just gonna make things worse. And after that, I decided to do a bunch of research, and that's when I discovered, because I was like, why would this happen? And so I looked into why this would happen, and that's when I discovered all these chemicals that I've talked about in some of my videos, especially the parabens, which A lot of people try to tell me that it's not true and that there's no just, indisputable evidence that parabens cause precocious puberty, but they weren't really used to such a heavy degree until the 1990s. So my generation is kind of an experiment. Before that, it's just used a little bit here and there. But like, I discovered and that really, really got into my head because it was like, oh my God, I'm unnatural. Like, but so some short guys are short 100% because of genetics. And that sucks, yeah. For me, it's partially genetics, but I was supposed to be 5'9" or 10. And I stopped growing when I was 12. But like the idea of being short because of something that's unnatural, like I'm some kind of twisted experiment of the elite to play around with and see how they could disadvantage people, that felt really like I was just like disgusted with myself. It made me hate my body even more. And I was like, I asked the doctor, please, is there anything I could do to keep growing? Like, will I grow more at all? And she said, you might grow another inch or two, maybe, and I didn't, but I ended up going all out above and beyond, went from, eating whatever crap that I got fed throughout my whole life, low quality stuff that the elites expect 99% to give their kids. I went from eating that to only eating really high quality, like elite tier foods, organic, farm to table, started doing community supported agriculture, paying for a box at a local farm, getting all these special sources of vitamins and stuff and hoping that it would help. And on top of that, I started working out and doing a lot of cardio. So just a lot of overcompensating from that moment on. And it became a tremendous burden because I was trying to take all these advanced classes in school. And when you're on top of taking advanced classes, having to do all the thinking for your family's, grocery plan or whatever, because my grandparents were willing to spend the extra money to do that for me, which is great, but they didn't understand any of it and they don't learn very easily. So I had to do all the thinking. I had to go to the farm myself, all this stuff. I started doing herd share, which is a way to get raw milk. So on top of that, the workouts, spending 4 hours, 3 days a week, approximately, sometimes 4, doing these long ass workouts. And it just took so much of my time. And on top of that, I had all this homework and I wanted to, do some gaming and stuff here and there. And I started numbing the insecurity with, first it was weed and cannabis, and I was doing it like crazy. But that didn't help really because all it did is make me think more and more about it. And like I would be playing video games and I would be seeing like metaphors in the video game of like height, hierarchy in life. So it's like I'd be playing What were you gonna say something?
No, I was just listening.
So like have you played Civilization 5?
I haven't. No,
Any of the Civilization games?
I haven't. That's very interesting.
But
Can you explain that?
It's a great turn-based strategy game, one of the best of all time, and you play as whatever like nationality you want, and you can take over the world, you can focus on science, you can focus on expansion, colonialism, and you just play through the ages, and it's really fun. It's like Risk, but way, way detailed. And that was my favorite game from the age of 13, pretty much always. And I would see how certain civilizations that were like had a bad start, because the biggest thing about that game is you have to have the best start. And if you have the best start, you get lucky, you're most likely to win. And you snowball. And once you have access, if you have access to more space to spread out to, like it takes a lot more initial investment to spread your arms and grow and expand outwards. But when you do that, you're sacrificing pain now and development now for a superior end position. And like, it's kind of the same way with the growth of the human body. Whereas like people that are smaller, they like go through puberty younger. And that's part of what the precocious puberty did. And that like, that's development. That's your sexual development. So I can kind of compare that to industrialization. Industrialization is like a puberty of a nation. And I was seeing all these, like every single thing I did, basically, gaming, reading biology textbooks, stuff about evolution, it all just pointed to the same thing that made me think more and more about how inferior I was. So I would see myself in the nation that started in like the Arctic and never got its feet off the ground and was surrounded by, you know, these large, powerful neighbors that grew and expanded beyond what they possibly could and then encroached around them and then bullied them and just exploited them into submission. And it just reminded me of real life so much, like interactions between people. And I'd be reading my biology books, same kind of thing, you know? But that's way more on the nose because in biology and evolution, they actually literally talk about that. But, you know, I've got more to say, but I'd like to know if you have anything you want to say in between.
So, what's dating been like for you?
Well, I got rejected a ton of times in high school and just always felt really inferior when approaching a girl that I liked, or usually I would just if I had a crush on a girl, I would just look at her a lot and just kind of be afraid to smile at her or make eye contact and kind of look away. That's how I was in high school. And, you know, I would just think there are so many of these other guys that are just so superior. Like, all it would do if I asked her out was like further confirm and cement my feelings of worthlessness. And, you know, maybe some of them might have said yes. I don't know. But like one time there was this girl when I was a senior and I really, really liked her. And I went up to her and she was in film class and we had a lot of downtime there. And I tried to talk to her and interact. And she was just always really cold towards me and made me feel like she didn't want me there. And it made me even more nervous. And then I said something like, I like your backpack. It's got like Native American designs on it. And I just stupidly, autistically thought, like, are you Native American? Because she was dark skinned and I thought she might have been, you know? And she just looked at me like, I'm Mexican. Got so pissed. And I just immediately thought, if this girl was interested in me, she would not react that way to such an innocent question. And then the next day she was sitting there like this, like 6'3", like football player kid who was really lanky too, like was rizzing her up. And she was like all over him, like giggling and smiling. And I just thought like, yeah, of course. Like, cause that whole time I was overcompensating by working out all the time. And I was way more muscular than that guy, better looking too. And just to see her prefer this lanky, tall guy over me just made me feel like thinking about everything I learned about biology, you know, it makes sense that they would want a lanky, tall guy over a guy like me because when you're, you know, just because you're lanky, it means you have potential. Like you haven't reached that level. Like what I was saying earlier about the development of nations and stuff. Muscular development is like another form of that. And all it really means is he hasn't reached it yet. It's going to take longer to reach his full potential. But when he does, it'll be all the better for it. And then it's like comparing Mother Russia when it's finished developing and industrializing to something like England, which was powerful a long time ago. But then now you've got countries like China and Russia that have vast resources and populations. And these smaller countries that developed earlier can't compete alone. They have to band together to resist. But it's like, it just makes sense. Like they want someone who has like aspects of themselves that they can't change. Like anybody can gain muscle, but you can't gain bone. And that's something that they can pass on to their offspring. And it's like ingrained genetically, instinctually into their preferences. So it kind of made me not want to try as much anymore. I still did. Like when I was in college, I felt compelled to try because like, why else am I doing all these workouts all the time? Like I'm doing them to attract women, so I might as well try. Vast majority of them just told me they had a boyfriend, even though it's probably a lie, or they told me they were lesbians. But one time I had a good experience. There was this one girl. She was 24 when I was 18, and she was just walking down the street. And I had seen her a couple times. We went to the same community college, and my friend who lived with me, he was sitting next to me, and I told him, "Oh my God, like, dude, she is like the perfect woman to me." Because I like really thick girls. So she was like pear-shaped, like this, like wide hips, just really, really lots of padding and jiggling going on. And he was like, he started yelling over to her. He was like, "Hey," and I was like, "Shut up," But then I made a plan. I sat at at this taqueria that was, between the school and where she walked, and sat there for like an hour. And then I saw her and I got up and I was like, "Hey, I've been noticing you walking by here and can't help but take interest. You're, I don't remember exactly what I said, but I practiced it, thought about it a lot." And she actually said yes. And I couldn't believe it. And we just went on 2 dates, but that was the first time I ever kissed a woman. And it was like very like long and drawn out, and it was awesome. But like the next day she called me and said, "I'm sorry, I don't want to see you anymore." Wait, actually, no, we went on one more date. Yeah, we went on one more date, and then she paid for the meal. And even though I said I did, I didn't have to, she didn't have to pay for the meal, she insisted on it. I think she did that to try and make me feel like I couldn't say that she owed me anything. And then that's when she called me and says that we don't have chemistry. And I was like, "What does that mean? Like, why? Like, what do you mean we don't have chemistry?" And she said, like, "You're not entitled to an explanation. I don't have to explain anything to you." And I said, "But you were my first kiss." And she said, "I don't fucking care." And then hung up on me. And another thing she said was that she was polyamorous, and her other boyfriend was a tall guy.
I bet.
Yeah.
What about?
So I don't know why.
Go ahead.
I don't know why she said yes.
What about in the workplace? Has your height affected you at all in the workplace?
Yeah, but not as much as others. So all those stories I told you right now were up until I was 19. And when I was 19, like just a few months into being 19, that's when I flipped and snapped, because I had reached, I know this isn't about the workplace just yet, but it kind of prefaces this. I had reached a point where I was so depressed and hated my body so much that I just wanted to die. And I had done all these workouts. I felt like I was a slave to this workout routine, and it wasn't doing anything for me. And then one day I had a gun to my head and I was going to pull the trigger. And right as I was going to do it, wasn't like this, it was a shotgun. Right as I was going to do it, that's when something flipped in my brain and I suddenly became a masochist. Like I was totally alpha, macho, like wannabe dominant male that whole time, like to the extreme, to be honest, like really extremely like alpha, dominant, wannabe. And then all of a sudden I went to the complete opposite, and I started liking tall, powerful, dominant women that did not have the feminine shape, that had the opposite. And like I started wanting to be towered over and bullied and humiliated by everyone. It like turned me on. And so when I went into the workplace, which was like 4 years after that, it was 3 years after that, because I went to college first. And I got really lucky. I got a really good job right out of college, that's a different story. But that was pure luck. And then when I went in there for a little while, everything was cool. You know, my manager was a woman, and she was also short. We were around the same height, and she was like 10 years older than me. She seemed to like me. I I think she was slightly attracted to me also, because you know, height doesn't matter 100% to every woman. But, like, there was like all these guys in there were trying to treat me like I was a kid. You know, I couldn't really tell if it was because I was the youngest person in the company, so that could have been it. But there was a time, like a couple months in, where I was really getting hazed, and this one guy who's a sales guy, because I was in the sales department, and he would always make fun of me and stuff. And one day he said something like, because he brought in a little puppy and it was so adorable, and it was running around on the floor, and he was like, "Hey, Chadlet, look at that little puppy's just like you." Because he was, I don't remember exactly what he said, but he basically said that I was like a little puppy, in that I was small, I was cute, and that I was innocent and new to the world. And you know what I said? Because I was so, like, such a masochist at that point, I laughed right along with him. I was like, "Oh my God, bro, you are so right. I am like that little puppy." And he was like so taken off guard by that like it seemed like he totally respected me from then on. And like he never said anything. He never teased me again. And in fact, he came to my defense several times and expressed like he cared about me a lot. So that was like it went from being a negative thing to a positive thing because of my reaction. But I will say that job went horribly, like in so many ways, and I did feel like I was getting glossed over. My contributions weren't getting acknowledged. Um, I was like, I was just feeling like I was putting 200% in, and just being, you know, someone else would take credit, or I just wouldn't be recognized, and or I'd be seen as like a threat. And that's another. Here's the other thing that I don't want to forget to mention is the performance reviews. So like, I was totally shocked after my first performance review. They said I had a lot to improve on, and I was like, well, Jesus, I really felt like I was like going above and beyond this whole time. And then the second performance review is when I really started to feel like there was some kind of heightism going on, because like there was this girl who tried to lie about me and say I said something offensive. And then there was this other young woman that I was working with who made a bunch of lies about me to say that I was slacking off when I was doing the exact opposite. But that's not really what clued me in. What clued me in was the comments of me being aggressive. And this is something that women experience a lot when they're just trying to be assertive and stand up for themselves and be like, you know, confident like men are supposed to be. And that's how I was trying to be. But just like a lot of women that are called aggressive for being assertive, the same thing happened to me. And the way I see it, because I know I wasn't being aggressive. I was just standing up for myself. And the way I see it is that because everyone looks down on me, they expect me to be submissive, which I am submissive in a relationship. But when it comes to my life and my goals and ambitions, I'm not really submissive. I don't like getting like walked all over and used in my career. So that's what they expect of me, and they expect me to just take it. And when I don't fit that, you know, archetype, they see it as overcompensating. And it's the same thing with the whole Napoleon complex. I made a video about that. Anytime a short guy is confident and assertive, they're called, like, they say that they're overcompensating and that they're being aggressive. And that's what I saw. Of course, then we went to the lockdowns not long after that. So.
Oh, this was right around the COVID there.
Yeah, this was the months the last months of 2019 and then the first 4 months of 2020. And then we went to work from home, and all of a sudden the height thing wasn't really as much of a factor.
That's interesting. So what would you say to other short guys out there? How can we overcome heightism? What's your advice?
Okay. Well, I can't say that what I've done would work for everybody, because what happened to me in becoming a masochist was completely involuntary. I didn't plan it or expect it at all or put any effort or will into it. But to me, that's like a really, that just set me free. And it just like turned it into something exciting and fun and spiced my life up. But like, if other people can do that, it's pretty awesome. But I'm not going to sit there and try to mold all of my viewers to being like me. That would be wrong. But like, what we can do as a collective is what I'm doing, basically raising awareness by shining a light on it. And the reason I don't respond to as many comments anymore is because everyone always says the same thing, and I always have to say this over and over and over again. What are you trying to do with these videos, bro? You're just bitching and complaining, and you should just go get leg lengthening surgery or something. So I have to tell them that what I'm trying to do here is like expose the dark, ugly truth to society as much as I can, so that they become consciously aware of it, so that the next time they have one of those biased, prejudiced judgments and act on it, they actually realize what they're doing, and they have to think, okay, if I do this, I'm being kind of a bad person. And they have to cross that filter of, okay, I'm going to intentionally be a bad person, or I'm going to try to be a good person because I want it. And hopefully the majority of people will want to be better. And like, that's the idea. But yeah, I had this one experience one time. Can I mention psychedelics?
Yes, absolutely.
So I had this psychedelic experience with one of my good friends this one time, where we like meditated in his room together. It was totally spontaneous. And we both entered into this realm. It was like a pit, like a pit with many sides going down into the darkness, surrounded by nothingness. And I know that we both experienced the same thing together because we talked about it in detail afterward.
Wow.
And we were literally communicating. And what we saw was all these dark cells, like sort of like prison cells, all around the side, going all the way down. And each one was like an individualized hell for that person, where like and for like some people, their hell is being super puny and inferior and weak and stuff like that, and being bullied and abused. And I was seeing some of that in there, and I was basically like this light. And as I went down, it shined into the deepest dark crevices of this space of people suffering that had never been brought to light before. And it was so disturbing and traumatizing, but it was something that like had to be exposed. And what my friend did was he absorbed the negative energy, because I was really sensitive to how fucked up it was, because it was part of my insecurity back then. And it would transfer to him, and we kept going down. And I feel like that's a great metaphor for what I'm doing here, is exposing what society, it's so disturbing that people just want to sweep it under the rug and pretend it doesn't exist and say, no, there is no heightism. All we want to talk about is sexism and homophobia and racism, even though that's been talked about to death and so many things have been done about it. And literally nothing has been done about this. And it's like to the point where they will literally call you a racist or whatever, just for saying that this is something that needs to be prioritized, like at least in discussion. And, I'm not saying to make a bunch of laws and stuff, although there are discrimination protection laws for religion, which is something you choose. So why wouldn't there be one for height? Because there isn't. That's pretty much the only thing I can think of. I don't want to force people to say certain terms or, be the PC police or anything like that. And, I just want to tell everybody what the terms are, explain why they are, you know, explain why they hurt people's feelings. And it's basically like microaggressions. Like the English language is so full of height-based terms more than anything else, more than related to black and white or, like male or female. Height dominates the English language and probably languages around the world. And I'm just like, I have this series where I talk about these phrases, and that way people can know like that these phrases are part of what continuously beats us down over time, over the course of a lifetime. Because every time you hear it, you think, oh my God, that's right, I'm inferior. And it totally throws you off of whatever you were doing. Not to me anymore, but that's how it used to be. And I actually started drinking when I was 16 years old, heavy, to block those kinds of thoughts out. That's how damaging it can be, is to drive a teenager to drink.
Yeah.
So, just make everyone aware of it so that it's mainstream, and then people talk about it. And that's it. No reparations, no stuff like that, just awareness and consciousness.
That's awesome, man. Thank you. Thank you for speaking out about this, man. It means a lot.
Well, thanks for listening.
Do you have some social media sites you want to plug for the listeners, if they can find out more information about your channels? Where are you located at?
So the number one thing that I love the most that I'm doing is the YouTube channel. That's Chadlet Maxxing, of course. Chadlet, Chadlet. It basically means like a short, attractive guy. And even though, Chad, these looks maxers have this massive like list of levels that, and of course they say I'm not a Chad, but I chose the name anyway because it's good SEO. So Chadlet Maxxing, like the end of looks maxing, Maxxing. That's where I do my long form content. That's where I've got my best videos, the heightist phrase series. I've got that on TikTok too, but it's a lot less in depth. I've got all my brutal rejection stories, in-depth analyses of experiences, things that people have said throughout my life that really, really were examples of heightism. Like my story about my teacher and the radio host, Michael Savage. So, and then with TikTok, it's like I made the TikTok to promote the YouTube, but the TikTok's doing pretty well. And I just do shorter videos and just quick, relatable clips. But I also do pretty heavily edited, like 30-second to 1 minute videos that talk about different topics related to heightism. Like one was, are tall people seen as natural leaders, which they are. And another one was about the Napoleon complex. And then I do a bunch of ones that I respond to people's comments, people's ridiculous comments, and just destroy them in like a debate of sorts.
Keep that up. Keep that up.
Yeah.
That's what I love to say.
Yeah, the last one didn't do too well. I don't know why, but I'll keep doing it. I've got Instagram under the same name, Chadlet Maxxing. I really don't have time to post there just yet. I guess it's kind of there in case I get banned from TikTok, or if I at some point somehow have enough time to start posting my back catalog to Instagram. But yeah, you can follow me there just in case. Other than that, I don't have a Discord yet. That's in the works. And yeah, that's about it.
Well, you gained one new fan. I could tell you that for sure. I'm definitely a fan, man, and I appreciate you coming on the podcast and talking with me today, man. I wish you the best, man. I wish you the best, brother, because we're in the same boat. I'm a short male also. That's why this topic is very near and dear to my heart, and I appreciate you talking with me today.
Thank you. Yeah, well, one positive, you've got a good head of hair.
Thank you. Thanks, brother. All right, man.
Yeah.
That's it. Have a good one.
You too. Bye.